All right, it is 12:01, so we're going to go ahead and get started. First of all, just wanted to say hello and welcome everyone who is on this webinar. I'm very excited. It's been in the works for a while, and it's going to be a good session today. A few housing notes right at the beginning. I did want to let everyone know that this webinar is being recorded and will be available on IAMU's YouTube channel. I will include the channel in the chat here later on. Also want to say that we do have some time reserved at the end for a question and answer session. So if you have any questions that come up as the webinar goes on, please drop those questions in the chat. I will record those questions and ask them to Joel at the end of our presentation. After that list of questions, if there's time, we'll kind of open it up to everyone to ask questions. But like I said, throughout the entire webinar, you can always drop a question in the chat. So with that, I'll get right into it. Welcome to our webinar today, Electric Vehicles, Get Ready. This is part 1 of 2 of an electric vehicle webinar series that the IAMU Energy Services is doing. Today we have Joel Zook with us. Joel Zook is a colleague of mine. We've worked together in the past, and Joel currently works for the Winneshiek Energy District and is the lead technical advisor working with farmers, business owners, and homeowners to plan their energy efficiency and renewable energy projects. He worked for several years within ratepayer funded utility efficiency programs, helping conduct small commercial audits while also providing support to a direct incentive rebate program and data center energy efficiency pilot project. Joel has a Bachelor's of Architecture from Illinois Institute of Technology in Chicago. And Joel, like me, also has the distinct credential of Certified Energy Manager awarded by the Association of Energy Engineers. Joel, thanks for being with us today, and I'll let you get to it.
All right. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for having me. Thanks for that great intro. I would never brag all about all those things myself, so it's great to have someone else talk about it. All right, well, great. No, I'm really excited to be here and happy to talk with you guys all. You know, I named this presentation Get Ready because for 2 reasons. One, I think it's a really big opportunity for electric utilities of all types to really see some benefits to how you operate your business, but also some customers are going to be moving in this direction, whether you're ready or not. So you should be ready for what that means, you know, to have customers with this extra load on your lines. So I just wanted to start off with some definitions. When I'm talking about an electric car, I'm talking about a car that plugs in so that you can plug it into the wall and get power, motive power from that electricity that your customers are going to be buying from you or somewhere else on the network of chargers across the state or wherever. So just 2 basic examples and a little bit of definitions and some examples of each. So battery electric vehicles are fully electric, and some examples of that are any of the Tesla things that are all electric. A Chevy Bolt, pictured at the bottom here, is an all electric car. A Nissan Leaf are those funny little ones, and then the Ford Mustang Mach-E at the top is also an all-electric car. So these are cars that don't have any gas, they don't have any motors except an electric motor, and all of their power is coming from their battery pack that they can plug in. A little bit different than that is a plug-in hybrid vehicle, and so some of those look a lot like the hybrid vehicles that you might be aware of, except that they have a little bit bigger battery and they have an ability to plug into the wall. So the Toyota has a Prius Prime and newly a RAV4 Prime, and those are working the same as the Prius and the RAV4s that you might have seen running around that have a hybrid engine, where previously they had an electric engine that would provide a boost, or it would provide regenerative braking to charge the batteries on board. But these plug-in hybrids are like that with the extra benefit of being able to plug in, and typically they can go 20 to 50 miles or so on all electric power, generally at lower speeds. So some other examples of that are a Chevy Volt. Ford has a couple of different models. This is an incomplete list. And Chrysler Pacifica is one minivan that I know that can go 30 or 50 miles, which is a great thing for soccer moms to run around town, all on electric power, and then to have that ability to go on a road trip with the gas in the tank. So I recommend you check out, if you're looking at buying or just learning more about electric cars, plugstar.com has a great option on information about electric cars. And this exact link down there, cars.browse, has a list of all the new plug-in electrics and fully electric cars that are available for purchase in the US. And it's a pretty good list, which is a surprising thing to know that there's that many out there. But I think that this list here is a pretty good indication of some of the top selling ones, and maybe the ones that aren't, incredibly expensive coming out from, Lexus and the like. Just a little bit of what we're going to talk about today. I really want to talk about the EVs as a possibility, as a win-win-win. They are good for your customers, and I'll tell you why. They're good for the environment, and they're good for your utilities bottom line, as long as you're careful about how you are implementing these programs. And just a little bit about charging, because I think that a lot of people are asking about that, and an emphasis on the timing of when your customers are charging is really important to managing your system loads. And then ways that you can motivate customers or members, I guess. I didn't change that name from when I presented this to RECs. So you can educate them, you can give them some rates that are beneficial to EVs. And if you've got, really big ambitions, you can even think about rebates for folks. But just a little bit, picking this up, talking about this win-win-win for everybody. I think the obvious benefit for folks is thinking about fuel costs. So energy.gov has this great little tool that they update, I think, once a month, talking about an e-gallon, and it's just thinking about what does it cost? So this is Iowa specific, with the average Iowa cost. Currently, I think this gas price is a little bit lagging, but at 276. So whatever, $2.53 for a gallon of gas. If you are wanting to drive your car for an equivalent amount of miles, if you're plugging into the average electric cost for Iowa, it's like you're paying dollar gas costs. So that's a great number to be able to share with your members, to give them an idea of, hey, that's what they think about, is how much money do I put in the gas tank each month or each week, each paycheck? And what would that look like if I was supplementing some or all of that with electricity instead? And being able to half or even cut in 3 gas costs is a huge, huge motivator. I've run the math myself. I have a Chevy Volt, and I kind of assume that when I am charging, I'm running around on a battery, I'm getting about $1.20 a gallon with my rates that are on Alliant Energy. So other win for customers is maintenance costs. But this is maybe not the greatest car comparison, but the Nissan Leaf is very similar to the Nissan Versa, similar in price, kind of, your subcompact car. But looking at comparing them, what they need in terms of regular maintenance over the course of their life, there's not much to do on an electric car. You rotate the tires and get new tires. Maybe you're checking your brakes, but you're checking your brakes even less often on an electric car, or even a hybrid car with that regenerative braking, that are less repairs on your brakes. So costs on maintenance are less. And again, just talking back to my own personal experience, I bought a used 2013 Chevy Volt in 2016. So that's 4 or 5 years now. It was 3 years old when I bought it. It had 40,000 miles. And in that time, I have changed the oil once a year. It is a plug-in hybrid car, and it has a little ticker that counts how much the gas engine runs. And basically, I've just changed my oil once a year because the oil was getting old, and even though I wasn't reaching that mileage. And I changed the wipers, they're kind of expensive. I've replaced tires and a brake caliper, and then my radio broke. That doesn't have anything to do with being an electric car, but that was the most expensive fix I've had on that Volt so far. And eventually, it's really looking like the customers are going to save on upfront costs. So this is just sort of a graph about the inevitability of electric cars coming out on top of conventional internal combustion engines. Internal combustion engines, cars are basically staying the same cost. They're going up a bit. Electric vehicles are cheaper to purchase, except for the fact that the battery is so expensive. So this is, a study saying, that in 2016, battery costs were about half the cost of the car. But as battery prices come down, just through economies of scale of getting a lot of batteries out there into the market, that is going to bring the cost down below an internal combustion engine at some point. And this is saying, before incentives. And so not to mention the tax credit that is out there for most manufacturers. Just giving this from another source, you can check this out, especially if this is something that you want to share with your customers. Consumer Reports is a great trusted brand that does the analysis, and they've done analysis on EV ownership, taking into account fuel, maintenance, and repair costs, as well as looking at the upfront cost of buying the car and financing it. And so they're just saying, a typical vehicle compared to a comparable internal combustion engine is going to save $6,000 to $10,000 over the life of the vehicle. So that's here already. This was from this fall 2020. And with those battery prices decreasing, I will expect that there will be eventually savings up front, as well as the ongoing savings from driving electric cars. So for the environment, a lot of people ask me this: are electric cars really cleaner? And the short answer is yes. There's no tailpipe emissions. But people always are asking a follow-up: is where is this electricity coming from? Is it really cleaner? And one thing I really like is to show people is that Union of Concerned Scientists has had a study that they came out with a number of years ago, showing that driving an EV already is cleaner from a carbon emissions standpoint than an internal combustion car. And the great thing is that they update it every year, and that the grid cleans up, electric vehicles get cleaner as well. So in the 2017 update, they were just saying that, nationwide, they were looking at the average electric vehicle getting an average of about 80 miles per gallon. And that is comparing the emissions from the fuel, right? So it's a mix of wind and solar and coal and natural gas and whatever that's going into powering that car. And taking that average over the US, 80 miles per gallon is pretty good. Just showing that in a map and how that can vary by the different grids. So this map is from 2009, and even in 2009, we were looking at, in our region, getting an equivalent from an environmental standpoint of just under 40 miles per gallon. And so there were a lot of good articles at that time talking about, hey, maybe driving a Prius is better than driving an electric car, because a Prius gets 50 miles per gallon. But again, this is using eGrid data from 2009. So switching forward to 2016, things clean up a lot. Almost everywhere in the country is getting over 50 miles per gallon at that point. And then here's the same map from the most recent update with 2018 data. And so just a couple pockets across the country. And I'll just flip back through that because it's really fun to see how this is getting cleaner and cleaner and cleaner. And of course, that trend is going to continue as coal plants come offline and more solar and wind gets on our grid. And to that point, here's a map from the Energy Information Administration. Transportation is the largest greenhouse gas producer by sector. So you can see that industrial and commercial have stayed flat for the good bit of time. Transportation has crept up, and electric power has dropped a lot. And so almost all of the United States' drop in carbon emissions has come from the electric power. So that's just to say that there's a huge opportunity there to be looking at transportation as well. Just one note on that is that about half of emissions from transportation are from small light duty vehicles, so cars and trucks. And so there's a really, really big opportunity there to clean those up, even before you start looking at heavier users. This is not a great clean slide, but what I'm trying to illustrate here is that this isn't a huge opportunity for utilities to sell more energy and feel good about what you're doing it. Generally speaking, in the Midwest, there's a surplus of wind power at night. And so that's when the wholesale power prices are the lowest. And also, just having those super low wholesale power prices does kind of put a downward pressure on wind expansion. So a great way to get more wind and to sell more power to customers is to have time of use pricing that encourages them to charge at night. So just to give a little bit about this, is it's good for the utility, and I have this asterisk here on that, is that just to talk about it's important at what time you're charging, and I'll talk about why. But as an example, a Nissan Leaf has a battery capacity of 60 kilowatt hours and 225 miles of range. So just doing some math on someone using that for a smaller commuter, not that they're charging that battery every night, but say they do a 50-mile round trip commute. That's 12 kilowatt hours a day. Well, that's great. I'm sure you all would love to sell every residential customer in your system 12 kilowatt hours a day, as long as it's at the right time. So the timing and level of EV charging is very, very important. You don't want them to be plugging in at that peak time. I imagine that would put you upside down on whether this was a good or a bad thing for you. So just to talk a little bit about charging. Homeowners can do a level 1 or a level 2 charger, and a level 1 charger is just a regular 120 volt outlet. So typically they're 8 to 12 amps, and so that's not a lot of energy, right? Maybe a kilowatt, 1.5 kilowatts. For a few $100, you can buy a charger, and maybe for another couple $100, you can get a dryer plug. I know they're not really dryer plugs, but a 220 volt plug installed in your garage for another few $100. And then you can really be charging pretty quickly. Whether those are 30 or 50 amps, that's 7 to 12 kilowatts. And so that's a good draw. And then level 3 are the DC fast charging. Those are big, right? Those are really expensive. They cost at least $10,000, $20,000 to put them up. And they're going to be charging a lot. We're really only seeing those around the interstates. So homeowners and really businesses are really going to be looking at level 2 chargers, probably for the most part. And the good news for you is that most charging is done at home. I believe that statistic is currently about 90%. I expect that to drop off a little bit as more people are actually taking road trips with their electric vehicles. It's easy to make sure that happens at night. And so what you want to make sure that you're not doing is that the easiest thing for people to do is to come home and plug in their car. And if that happens at 5 o'clock, that could be really bad. So you need to have some sort of way to work with them on smart controllers or a time of use rate to encourage them so that they can plug in their car when they get home. But the charger doesn't actually turn on until 7, 8, 10 o'clock, whenever it is your peak is that you can have them charge at those nighttime hours. We can talk more about that, especially if people have questions on that specifically, but how do you get your customers to get an EV, and how do you get them to, convince them to charge at night, not during your peak time? Just tell them, show them. AAA has an electric vehicle site, which is a great thing for folks. This is just an example of Alliant Energy's website that they have on electric vehicles. This is a good resource of data. The other thing you can do is just to think about setting rates to encourage EV adoption and off-peak charging. Again, getting them to be charging at night during outside of your peak time. So some examples here. Excel has a time of use rate. Dakota Electric, I believe they are an REC. They actually have a sub-metered rate where people are getting very cheap power at night, and it's just simply not available through the day. And they also have a time of use rate that has 3 tiers. More locally, My Energy, which is formerly Hawkeye REC and Tri-County REC up here in Winneshiek County and across the border in Minnesota, they offer a EV charging rate where they get a sub-meter, and they are charging only 5.5 cents per kilowatt hour off peak. And they do allow people to charge on the on-peak hours, but they charge 20 cents a kilowatt hour for that. And this is all versus their standard rate of about 12 cents a kilowatt hour. And these rates don't have to be EV specific. This My Energy actually does have this special sub-metered rate, but Alliant Energy has a time of use rate. It's not EV specific, but it's really, really good for EV customers. They charge 50% of their base rate during the off-peak hours, which are from 8 at night to 7 in the morning, and then all weekend. And then on peak, they charge 140% of their base rate. So again, that's not EV specific, but it's a really great rate for anybody who has a level load, but it's a no-brainer for EV owners to be on that. And a lot of the Corn Belt members that are RACs also have this time of use rate that they're really trying to target their peak hours from 5 to 9 p.m. And so they charge 16 cents during that peak time and 8 cents off time. So there's no need for smart controllers or utility actual control of those chargers. You're just sending a market signal to your customers to say, hey, you can charge whenever you want, but we're going to charge you double if you plug it in at 5 o'clock or don't have a smart charger to have this charge at overnight. So it is that rate is a great fit for EVs. And I'll just mention too that some RECs out there are incentivizing customers either through rebates or signing up for that EV specific rate that the EVs are set up as an interruptible rate that the utilities can use as a demand response piece 3 or 4 times a year, I think generally is what they're trying to target those. Of course, if you've got money and you want your customers to get EVs, you can give them rebates. You can give them rebates for chargers or for cars. You can give them free chargers. You can figure out a way to finance EVs, either directing them to financing or being able to do some on-bill financing. These are just examples on the right here from Green Mountain Power. But more locally, again, both Mid-American Energy and Alliant Energy have rebates for level 2 chargers, and Mid-American has a rebate on new electric vehicles themselves. So, and I believe that those are not coming from the ratepayer funded efficiency funds. They've decided to use investor dollars for those because they've done the math and knowing that paying a few $100s for an EV charger to encourage EV adoption is going to grow the market and grow the amount of energy that they're going to be able to sell. And again, I mentioned these before, 2 of our local RACs have rebates on a level 2 charger, but to get the rebate, you need to sign up to be on an interruptible load with that charger. Of course, another way to get your customers excited about electric vehicles is to lead the way. Figure out how you can get an electric vehicle yourself, whether it's your car that you drive around. I know Alliant has had a lot of EV charge cars. They've got a couple Volts. They've got a couple Volts that they drive around that their key account managers use. Anytime they're doing outreach events, they're showing up in electric cars. But they've also pledged to electrify all of their light duty vehicles by 2030. So this includes their half-ton pickups. We'll talk more about pickups at the end. Alliant also has some hybrid utility trucks. I don't really know the details on these, but evidently the crane has a battery so that they can operate that crane without the truck needing to idle. And they've said that not only is that nice and environmentally friendly, but it's actually really nice for the linemen because the truck, they don't have the truck noise. So it's a quieter workspace for them. They can hear things that are happening more easily. And it's nice not have to deal with the diesel fumes while you're just needing to operate the crane. Trucks are coming. For a while there, we had a lot of these new trucks that were entering the market. So Rivian had a very fancy looking truck that they were trying to base for campers. Tesla had their Cybertruck vehicle that looked very cool and futuristic. This other one on the piece there is a Bollinger, which is sort of like a stripped down electric Jeep. But if you've been paying attention, I think the big news is that Ford has a all-electric Ford F-150. I think they look really awesome. They look like they are powerful and useful, and they have a giant front trunk that has all sorts of power outlets in it that you can plug a cooler into, or you can run your saw off it at a work site. They look really great, and they've got a range that's 200 or 300 miles, depending on the trim package that you get. So we'll see how these newcomers do on the truck space. I personally think that Tesla is going to continue to sell awesome cars to people, and that Ford is probably going to continue to win on their pickup domination. But of course, you know, the General Motors has an all-electric Hummer coming out as well. That's sort of an SUV, sort of a pickup truck. Chevrolet has announced an all-electric Silverado. So there's more that's coming. And oh, Jeff, I see in my notes that I neglected to get you a piece on rebates. Do you want to come back to talk about that, on what the MuniBucks has available to members?
Yeah, yep. So I'm going to open up my rebate portfolio here. But yeah, currently MuniBucks does offer rebates for electric vehicle charging in the residential setting. And I believe we have a rebate for electric vehicles as well if you're a part of the MuniBucks program. I would also just say that every year, me and John Von Hars, we get together with the participants in MuniBucks and we reevaluate what our rebates should be for the following year. And I can say that so far, we've had some discussions about maybe changing the rebates for charging a little bit, maybe even doing some time of use stuff. But I will also just say that all of those changes to MuniBucks it's a collaborative process between our current participants. So no one will get left behind. It'll be a joint decision. And yeah, I would just say that, you know, there's a lot of benefits to having EVs on your grid in your city. And so we're going to accommodate our members and make sure that they see the most benefit possible from that. Thanks.
Good. I was going to mention too here, just as far as truck being larger vehicles. Of course, they are the consumer-driven piece. That the other thing that you can do is really think about school buses. School buses would be a great thing if you have a school bus garage in your territory. They're obviously going to use a lot of energy, but they're going to be powering up at night for the most part. Maybe back again during the day to top off. But shouldn't be in your peak demand piece, especially if you are a summer peaking utility, right? Assume that those school buses are going to sit empty most of the summer. So that's a really good option, and you could sell a lot of energy if you convince your school district to go on electric buses.
I'll just say anecdotally, there's been a lot of people that I've been talking to about particular companies converting their entire fleets to EVs, or a mix of plug-in hybrid electric vehicles and EVs. So that tide is definitely coming.
Yeah, and I really think that just having a more conventional work vehicle in the F-150 being available, and the others that are coming down the line, you know, talk to your counterparts at the city and the street department. I got to imagine that most street department trucks, they've got to be rugged, they've got to be useful, they've got to be powerful, but they're not taking road trips with them, right? They should be staying in town. So 300 miles of range, 200 miles of range, whatever trim model you're getting on those trucks, seems like it should be enough to get a good deal of work done and to be able to charge those up every night. So. Well, Jeff said I could talk just a little bit about what the Energy District is and what we're here for, and then I'm happy to answer questions as they come in. Keep them coming. I kind of scrolled through those when Jeff was talking about rebates, and I think we can get through what's there. So if you've got more, send them, keep them coming. So the Winneshiek Energy District, we're a nonprofit based in Decorah, Iowa, and our vision is 100% local, renewable, energy efficient energy by 2050. So that's a big goal, but we are working towards a world where people are using less energy, people are producing more energy locally, so those dollars that we're spending on energy are staying within our local economy. So we've been around for about 10 years. We've got a dozen or so other energy districts that are founded in various, some of them are brand new and just getting off the ground. A couple of them have been around. We are mostly kind of concentrated up here in the northeast corner of the state. But we think that energy is a big piece of our local economy. And then if we can figure out how to spend money on energy efficiency and renewable energy, that's money that stays within our economy, both through savings in customers' pocketbooks, but also the dollars that we're spending with local contractors who live here in our communities. So, and we really like municipal utilities as well because they're locally owned and operated. So really excited to be here today. Thanks, Jeff, for having me. You want to ask some questions that came in through the chat, and I'll do my best.
Absolutely. Before I do questions, I am just going to say to all of our members who are on this webinar, we do have part 2 coming up of this webinar series. That'll be on June 30th. During this webinar, we are actually going to go through an EV toolkit that IAMU has created specifically for municipal utilities. So the toolkit includes some marketing materials, some different program designs, and also a very big and complex spreadsheet that will forecast EV load growth and do a bunch of different ancillary calculators in there that are extremely helpful to municipal utilities. That is going to be available if you're an American Public Power Association or APPA member online on their website. We can also distribute that, but please do attend that webinar. The other piece of housekeeping I have is if you are a IAMU member, please fill out the 21 annual rate survey. This is going to help us develop a bunch of information and put together some statistics so different munis can compare rates and different services. And there's some questions about the derecho, emergency response, mutual aid, that sort of thing. So please do fill that out as it's very helpful to us. So with that, I'm going to get going through the questions here. The first question that we have is from Evan Hoffland. Evan, I hope I'm saying your name right, sir. And the question that Evan asks is, do you think this new idea of e-fuel will slow down the push for purchasing EVs? By using synthetic fuel in the internal combustion engine, making it just as clean as EV. Before I kick this over to you, Joel, I do want to provide some back information for the folks who may not be familiar with this e-fuel thing that Porsche is currently researching. So e-fuel from Porsche, it's a project that they've researched. It is a type of fuel that uses carbon dioxide, CO2, and hydrogen ingredients, and are made using renewable energy, which reduce significantly the initial greenhouse gas emissions to create the fuel compared to petroleum-based fuels. I do want to point out that e-fuel, this project Porsche, is not the same thing as hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. Those are different. We consider those to be EVs, but this is a different thing. You have e-fuel over here, which is a research project by Porsche, and then hydrogen fuel cell vehicles over here. And another piece of background that I will say on the Porsche researched e-fuel, just recently, the CEO, when they released a Porsche 911 GT3, they said that they're currently working on their first small test batches. They have 130,000 liters of it. They are testing it. No e-fuel is going to be ready to market until 2022. Like I said, it is a mix of CO2 and hydrogen. It's meant to be used in existing internal combustion engines. My answer to this real quick, personally, is that I have doubts about the emissions cleanliness of an e-fuel vehicle. And I would also like to see more life cycle analysis of how that fuel is being made, right? As if your EV is powered by wind power generated here in Iowa, sent to you on the grid, that's perhaps more cleaner environment generation fuel than however the CO2 and hydrogen is being made, right? So again, I'll kick it to you, Joel. The question is, do you think Porsche's new idea of e-fuel will slow down the push for purchasing of EVs? I'll kick it over to you.
Yeah, you know, I'm not familiar directly with Porsche's e-fuels, but I think that there's going to be a place for synthetic fuels somewhere in the future. But I think it's going to be focused in aviation, just because there's no way to get the kind of energy density there isn't at least a viable way to do an electric version to get the energy density for flights that are going to go across the ocean. So I think that there's probably going to be some sort of synthetic fuels for those things like that. Maybe even for, there's a biofuels option that's going to continue to be competitive for semis and long distance trucking. But I just think on cost alone, lithium ion batteries and electric motors are going to be the cheapest way to get people from wherever they want to go. We're already seeing the ranges go up into the zone of where people are really not going to be too concerned about that whole range anxiety thing. As more and more level 2 chargers or level 3 chargers are out there on the interstate, I just think that the cheapest car up front and to operate from a passenger standpoint, from a light duty vehicle, is going to be all electric vehicles. So I'm not like a market analyst or anything. I read some, but I think that the future of our transportation will be electric vehicles.
I agree, Joel. And, I'll just put one more thing on this is that, even if you do have your existing internal combustion engine, you're using Porsche's new e-fuel when it comes out 2022 is commercially available, you're still going to have that increased maintenance cost of having an internal combustion engine. If you think back to that slide where Joel was showing the e-gallon, my thought is that the e-fuels are still going to be a high price compared to the low cost of an electric vehicle e-gallon. So I would keep that in mind. That's one thing I'm gonna research and find some more things about, and I'll make sure to share that with you, Evan. Thank you for the question. I appreciate that. Joel, our next question is from Joe Hedja. His question is, what's the quick way to answer, and this is in quotes, but won't more EVs increase demand for electricity and increase cost?
Okay, well, I'll answer the quick one, and then Jeff, you can tell me if I want to go longer on that. I mean, I think in some ways, what you might be looking at is won't lagging sales, if your sales from electricity are dropping and more customers are putting distributed generation on the grid, won't your costs go up because you'll have the fixed cost that you'll need to maintain with a lower base? So of course, it's a balancing act, and I understand where you're coming from, but I've got to assume that some growth on the electric side of things and increased sales is going to be better. The other thing, though, is you do want to be able to, as much as you can, manage your energy versus your demand. And again, with good market signals like a time of use rate or through interruptible load programs, you should be able to sell a lot more energy, sell more kilowatt hours, while not increasing the peak demand of your system. And whether that's your peak system, and just saving on the peak demand is going to save both in your purchasing of that, but also just in your infrastructure costs. So sorry, maybe that wasn't the quick answer. That was getting kind of lengthy.
No, that's a great answer. I really don't have anything to add to that one. I appreciate that. Next question, there were some questions in the chat about, basically when you put gasoline into your internal combustion engine vehicle, a certain percentage of that price that you're paying is taxes, right? To maintain our great roads in Iowa and to do some other things. I just wanted to note that Jeremy Karen, who is, Jeremy, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on your title, but he works for the city of Des Moines as a sustainability officer. And he linked a really good DOT study that has some facts on current supplemental EV fees that do try to capture some of the taxes, recover lost revenue from road use taxes. So I would encourage everyone to look at that. Next question. Well, this is more of a point, but I'm going to highlight it to the group. Russell Eimers says, Nikola is working on electric and hydrogen fueled fuel cell powered pickups and semi trucks. They have trucks going through operation trials in Indiana. None are on sale yet. I haven't heard about Nikola yet. They were a big name kind of a few years ago when EVs and hydrogen fuel cell was just getting off the ground. Joel, do you have any insight on Nikola as a company?
A lot of people put a lot of money into them. I don't know if they're going to get anything out.
Yeah.
You know, I try not to stay on the bleeding edge of things. I'm very excited about electric vehicles, but I'm excited about electric vehicles that have sold, you know, at least 50,000 units that are out there driving around.
Yeah.
I didn't buy a Chevy Volt as soon as it came out. I bought a used one. And so, I mean, I guess I would just be, there was a lot of money I felt like sloshing around these past couple of years, and a lot of it went into new electric vehicle startups. I would just recommend sticking with someone who's got a track record. And the good news is that there's plenty of electric vehicles out there that have that. So you can go all in on electric vehicles if you wanted to, without taking a leap into some unknown company.
Absolutely.
Jeff, if you don't mind me mentioning the previous point on taxes, on road use taxes, and on the electric vehicle registration costs, it is a very good point that you know, we pay for our roads in Iowa through gas taxes, and so increases in fuel efficiency or switches to electric vehicles are going to affect that. And I think it's going to be very painful because it's going to take used to getting something new, but I think we've got to go to a vehicles miles traveled tax that is assessed. You know, it doesn't have to be hard. I mean, it doesn't have to be like a vehicle tracker in your car. It just means to me, like, you know, like maybe in your income taxes, you say, here's the car I've got. It had 10,000 miles at the beginning of the year. It's got 25,000 miles on it now. I don't know the answer to it, but, you know, obviously an EV is putting the same wear and tear on the road, maybe more because they're heavier than a conventional car of the same type. And as Jeff mentioned, the DOT piece, there is a I pay higher registration on my car because it's a plug-in hybrid. But that's not a great way to do it either, because they've tried to assume one price for all EV owners. So the EV owners that drive a whole lot of miles are quite frankly getting a really great deal, and the folks that have an EV car that doesn't drive more than 10, 12,000 miles a year are kind of getting socked with those costs. So vehicle miles tax traveled is a great way to make that happen long term. And in the meantime, we're dealing with higher registration prices, which are fine. The tricky thing is that they've also put a tax of a couple fractions of a cent on public chargers that's going to take place in a number of years. And that is really bad, not because of the dollars that it represents, but of the huge headaches that anyone who owns a charger is going to have to deal with.
Absolutely. Great points, Joel. I appreciate that. So we have Miles Hayes in the chat who says fleet electrification is key in his opinion, and I personally agree. I think electrification of fleets is going to be big, and that point that can be really tough for utilities, right? If you have a 20 vehicle fleet that says, hey, we all want to go to EVs, and now you have to provide the infrastructure to be able to charge that many EVs in one location, you know, that can get pretty tricky. If that's a concern of yours as a member of ours, I would recommend attending our next webinar where we'll talk about the EV toolkit. And I would also say that I've recently talked with John Waldron from the Des Moines-based engineering firm called Shive Hattery. Shive is an associate member of IAMU. They've done a number of EV projects and EV fleet projects. And so if you're looking for a local company who has expertise, you know, reach out to Shive there. Let's see. I'm going to look through some other questions. We've got about 15 minutes left. I'm feeling pretty good about our question time here. So, here's a question from Chris Krogman. Chris is one of our IAM members. Chris says, I am interested to see how utilities change rates to accommodate fast chargers that have a high demand, but not a high kilowatt hour usage. Joel, do you have anything to say on that?
I'm interested in seeing as well. I mean, I wonder, I'm not a rate expert, so I don't, you know, if I say something stupid, you just take it with a grain of salt. I guess I assume that you've already set your prices to reflect the actual sort of cost of that. If someone is peaking a demand, they're going to get hit with a high demand charge, even though their per energy cost might be very low. So I'm also interested in seeing how they change, and I wonder if demand prices will go up. And you know, is that what is needed to send a market signal to, you know, say a third party who owns an EV charging station that, you know, maybe they need to put a rack of batteries at their charging station so that they're drawing a lower, more constant rate of power from the grid, but they're able to dispatch 50, 100, 200 kilowatts to a car customer who pulls up and wants to top off in 20 minutes. Just, you know, I mean, just try to make sure that you're not letting members cross subsidize one another. And if there are expenses due to that customer's high demand, you know, make sure the demand charge covers them.
Absolutely. Great points, Joel. Appreciate it. We've got Miles Hayes in the chat. Miles says, I think hydrogen will become more available to supplement nat gas-fired power plants that will produce cleaner power to charge EVs. Not really a question. I would say that I agree with that point, and I think that that's a good way to go forward. Here's another question from Steve Carr. Thanks for being here, Steve. Steve says, to what level and when do you believe energy storage systems, batteries, will be implemented in conjunction with EV charging stations for peak management and energy distribution? I'll give a quick one on this, Joel, then I'll give to you. On one, there are some companies who are already implementing projects like this. One of them is SEMA Connect. Go to them if you're interested in that. I'm sure that Shive Hattery, who is on here also with some solutions. And I will say just anecdotally, on the residential level, this system already exists, right? It's a Tesla charger and a Tesla Powerwall. And so as far as managing peak management and energy distribution, I think you're going to find more of the investor-owned utilities get these grid assets and have them under what we call managed charging to distribute peaks and to help energy management out on the grid. I know that there are investor-owned utilities who are already doing that. I'm not sure about Mid-American and Alliance, and I'm kind of wishing I would have invited them on this call, but Joel, do you have anything to add to that? The question is, when do you believe energy storage will be implemented in connection with EV charging stations and peak management energy distribution?
I mean, I think anytime. I mean, it's going to just, in my opinion, it will respond to market conditions. And so whether, you know, if it's a project that a utility is figuring out how to put in and finance themselves, makes a lot of sense to have some batteries next to some EV chargers to manage, you know, whatever portion of your distribution grid that you've got it on. If it's a third party that's putting this in, you know, what is the balance between your energy cost and your demand cost? And, you know, if they're getting killed on a demand cost, they're going to put some storage in. And again, you know, that should be a way that you can send market signals to your customers, whoever, that, hey, you know, our power is very expensive when you get it from us at 200 kilowatt hours at a time. We need infrastructure to put that in, you know, and it affects maybe the whole circuit that it's on. So, you know, battery prices are continuing to drop. And so it's always going to be a moving target of a push and pull on that. Batteries will be cheaper. Projects that won't make sense this year are going to make sense in 2 or 3 years.
Absolutely.
Joel,
really great.
if I could add something real quick too. This is Jeremy Karen with City of Des Moines, formerly in Jeff's role at IAMU. There's also, so there's the technical aspect of the technology of storage, having some breakthroughs and becoming more cost effective, and Joel addressed that. But I also wanted to mention too that a lot of city governments are establishing very aggressive climate goals, and there's increasing pressure on them and the ones that haven't to adopt them, as well as some of the major corporations that are in some of our communities throughout Iowa, especially the tech companies that are building data centers here, driving them to, further consider their ESG goals and use more renewable energy and help support storage projects and clean up their resources. So we're going to see increased pressure both from the economic development side and the customer side, as we are from increases in technology capability as well.
Mhm.
Absolutely. The pressure will be from many sides. It's not just going to be end users and chargers, I would say.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, I would just to recommend that, guys, when you're thinking about this, really do give make sure that you've got some nuance available to talk when you're talking about EVs, because I think a level 1 and a level 2 charger, it doesn't look that much different than some other loads that you might have at a business or a home. Level 3 chargers, wow, that's something totally different, right? So, I mean, I think you got to be really careful about where those are going to be. I don't know how many of your members, Jeff, are on the interstate. I think that level 3 chargers are going to continue to cluster around the interstates and major highways. And so just make sure that, you're treating level 3 chargers very carefully, but making sure that you're not setting up rules that would stymie someone from putting a level 2 charger up. Because that really should be enough that you should be able to handle, at least until you're getting into some sort of, fleet or parking lot where you've got rows and rows of them. And to me, the answer at that point is figure out how do you get those linked and networked together so that if you have 20 chargers sitting next to each other, it's great that they're there and they're available, but maybe they can only run all at 50% capacity if they're all plugged in. And in the meantime, if they're not going to be all used 24/7, which seems unlikely to me, you've got the ability for cars to come in and out of there and have 10 of them at full power, for the service level that you've put up to them. So.
Yeah, I would say managed charging is this, as EV adoption rates increase, which they're increasing greatly in Iowa, as they increase, managed charging is going to be the name of the game. And so that's the point of this webinar. That's the point of all the talks Joel gives. In order to implement this successfully as municipal utilities, my thought is that it'll be very prudent to get out ahead of the extreme growth that's being forecasted right now. So a similar question, this is from John Bilstein. This is more of a technical question, but I'll take it over to you, Joel. How will level 2 chargers impact a transformer and electric feeder? Could we see multiple chargers in a home as customers purchase multiple electric vehicles?
Yeah, well, I think the important thing is, yes, I mean, I'll answer the second part first. You could obviously easily see 2 electric vehicles in a customer's home. I think that that's going to happen more and more. I think right now, I think there's a lot of EV owners that have 1 EV, right? And then they've got a gas car that they can use for road trips, right? And so, but as the range increases and there's more public chargers out there, I think that people become more comfortable with it. They're going to have 2 EVs in their garage. And so, that is one potential use of rebates, is that, if you give a $100 rebate or a $400 rebate, customers will tell you when they're putting an EV charger in. And maybe it's not a big deal if one person does that, but yeah, it could be a problem if these things will cluster, right? So maybe, John puts an EV in and then his neighbor puts one in too, and then everyone else in the neighborhood thinks it's a really great idea. All of a sudden you've got 4 EVs on a 25 kVA charger. It could be a problem, and it's at least good for you to know about that in advance. I will say, at least as far as, as homeowner controls are, there are, dual smart chargers out there where, kind of the same thing that I talked about in the parking garage situation, where you could have 2 chargers that plug into one 50 amp breaker. and it could charge either of those cars at 50 amps, or it could charge them both at 25 apiece. So there are ways for customers to be managing their load, and I don't know the answer as to how to get the best insight into what your customers are doing behind the meter, so that you can ensure that their transformer or their circuit is going to be ready. You're going to be ready for them. Yeah, I'm sorry, that's beyond what I get into.
Yeah, and honestly, it's a little bit beyond what I get into as well. And to that question, I would say no. Now is time to reach out to some of these folks in industry, some of these contractors and third-party implementers who have more technical experience and who might be able to help you with a plan or get some insights, get some free consulting, because they'll give it to you. And again, I'll mention SEMA Connect and also Shive Hattery, who is an IAMU associate member. We've got another good technical question from John Bilstein. I'm right off the bat, I'm going to say I do know the answer to this, but I'm going to throw it out here. Is it more common to install dry cell transformers to get a 480 volt service versus installing a 480 volt distribution transformer?
I'm not going to try to answer that question because I don't want to give any advice on system design. I really deal with, customer end things, and
Yep. John, you're a very smart man. I'm very happy that you're on the call. And I would say again, I did in the chat mention John Waldron, senior mechanical engineer at Shive Hattery, associate members. If there's anyone on the call who might have insight to that, you're welcome to speak up. Okay, I'm gonna move it along. Next one, John. I'll forward that question to John Waldron at Shive and see if we can get some answers for you. Here's just a comment from Russell Eimers. Russell says Nikola is most likely going to address heavy trucks and possibly locomotives. I would agree with that. I think that's correct. Steve says thanks. Thank you, Steve, for being on the call. We appreciate you. All right, we have Isaiah Burrell on the call. Isaiah is, sorry, Isaiah, I don't have your title off the top of my head, but Isaiah mentions for the previous question, AMI data can provide transformer loading. Great insight. It's AMI, for those who don't know, is advanced metering infrastructure. Isaiah, if you're still on here, honestly, you're welcome to unmute and speak on that if you want. I'll just say Isaiah has a lot of insights on AMI. I've seen some of the dashboards he has, and they're doing great work at Lynn County.
Yeah,
so
I got to run
go ahead,
to.
Isaiah.
Yeah, I'm here, so I got to run to another call here soon. But yeah, it definitely provides quite a bit of insight as we're tracking EV participation. That is something we're looking at the member level and also the transformer level. So that would be a big thing to kind of track as we get more and more EV participation on our lines. So, but that is a great tool to allow you to kind of do infrastructure planning.
Yeah, great insight.
Absolutely.
And again, I'll just say that, if you have a rebate or any sort of EV programs out there for customers, it at least gets them flagged to say, hey, this person has an EV in their house, and this is maybe the circuit that we need to be paying attention to.
Absolutely. We also have on here a gentleman by the name Miles Hayes. Miles is a former researcher at NREL, National Renewable Energy Lab, and currently works for a company called eSource. Miles, if you wanted to add any of your 2 cents on some of the topics we've discussed, you're very welcome to.
Yeah, hey guys. Sorry, I wasn't really ready to jump on a conference, but good to see you. Good to see you.
Putting you on the spot.
Familiar faces. And hello, Isaiah. Great to see you guys. This has been a great conference. I have some insight, I guess, more from like the IOU side of things, I do a lot of consulting for utilities in California. And I'm not really sure, I don't want to speak like directly to what's going on in Iowa, but this has been really insightful. But I would just say there's a lot of attention right now around a lot of the topics you're talking about. But one of the really interesting emerging things I'm excited about are like this potential to get EV manufacturers to partner with electric home builders. So there's a big electrification push, you know, all electric homes being built in California. So there's some interesting potential there when you talk about V2G, V2H, vehicle to home capabilities. And I'll just say, I think one of the major barriers is just in educating EV owners about the, you know, the truth about the degradation that your battery would experience when maybe comparing like a fast charge to just some discharge that you might be able to offer the grid. So I think we're going to see that. I think right now there are a few barriers in place, but I'm hoping in the next few years, V2G will become more common, a more common term. But thanks for the introduction, Jeff. I'm happy to connect with anybody too. If there are other questions, like from an IOU perspective, I'm happy to give my 2 cents on what I hear.
Absolutely. Appreciate the input, Miles. eSource is another good company that's out there doing some really good stuff in the EV and pretty much anything energy space. So yeah, we are at 102. Joel, if you want to hang out a little bit, I actually have 2 questions for you for myself personally that came up. First of all, do you have time to hang out?
I do. Is that
okay?
No, I mean,
okay, perfect.
Not for another hour.
Not all day.
I'm happy to stick around for
Nice. So I will say, you know, I feel like in the past, a barrier to entry in the EV car space has been the high price of buying a new EV, buying a Tesla.
Yeah.
And so my question is, could you talk more about your experience buying a used EV and resale value and just what that all was like?
Yeah, no, it's a great point to start thinking about, you know, how this can be available to all customers. And it's something that we haven't spent a lot of time working on at the Energy District, but I would like to figure out how it's even to make EVs even more accessible than say solar for low to moderate income customers because they need a car. And if an EV is a comparable price to whatever car they might be purchasing otherwise, that is a great way to get them into the new energy economy for maybe the same cost that they'd be buying another car anyways, as long as they've got some dollars to put, you know, some charging infrastructure in their place, which can be hard if they're renters, but at least, you know, in our rural areas out here, a lot of folks are still owning their homes. I guess I can't speak too much. I bought one car, you know, and I bought a used car. It was pre-leased. It was 3 years old, had 40,000 miles on it. It was fairly painless. I don't have a whole lot of experience buying lots of cars anyways. But you know, we were looking at a car. We looked at several cars. We went to buy a plug-in hybrid, but it didn't cost a whole lot more than other cars that we were looking at. And at the time, at least, we had really great financing options for any car that was less than 4 years old. So sorry, I don't have a whole lot from a personal experience to add to, but I really do think that there is a huge potential out there for low to moderate income households to be buying EVs, either new or used, as prices come down and cost. There are some fairly cheap EVs out there, even new ones, and tax credits available to help if you can claim them. But even on the used market, I mean, you can get a Leaf for like $9,000. So I don't think that EVs currently hold their value that well. And honestly, that's just because of a market distortion of the tax credit. You can buy a new EV for $30,000. You drive it off the lot. Once you've taken the tax credit on it, it's only worth 22. So when the EV tax credit, which is great to help the market get started up and going, but when that phases out, I think we'll see less market distortion and better cost retention within the used EVs.
Jeff,
That's-
if I could
The
add,
flip side of that is that, you know, if you can't take a tax credit yourself, or you're not able to use that, you can get a used EV for that much less, because the first owner is taking the tax credit for it.
some other
absolutely.
considerations that like cities and the federal government are thinking of right now too is all alternative transportation systems, because of when you're thinking about equity, a lot of low-income individuals tend to be located more towards the urban core, and they're using buses and they're using bikes. And so developing programming around electric bikes or electrified bus systems or transit systems is another aspect that a lot of communities are thinking about too, and certainly something we're thinking about in the city of Des Moines.
That's great. That's great.
Great.
Yeah,
stuff.
you know, I'd be interesting too, you know, if you're a big enough city to start thinking about just disparities between neighborhoods, map those public chargers that are available to folks, and use whatever powers you can through persuasion or arm twisting to make sure that, you know, that they're not putting public chargers only in richer neighborhoods, right? Make sure that they're getting distributed evenly across your city so that all have that ability to access them. And maybe even make sure that they're focused in places where you've got a larger percentage of renters.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I'll, you know, we're 6 minutes of time here, but I'll give one final opening for if anyone wanted to unmute, ask a question, or provide some feedback. Cool. Well, I'll just say, you know, everyone who's on this call is invited to our next webinar on June 30th, where we'll be rolling out our EV toolkit. If you do not have that link, please email or call me. I'll send it to you. Thanks again, everyone, for attending. I think this has been a great webinar, and I really appreciate all the questions and the feedback, and appreciate your time, Joel. Thank you for all the good information. And thanks, and we'll talk to everyone soon.
Absolutely, Jeff. Thanks for having me. This was a great discussion. I really enjoyed it.
Good deal. Thanks, everyone. Take care.